I think all these young people in school now are hungry for something that they don't get or they wouldn't write to me. And I think also that it's an instinct of the higher nature. You see, you're only human as you rise above the animal. Your animal self is one fundamental factor or element in your life. Then when you come into the higher things that are not animal, the things of the spirit, then you get into this realm that we call art, and you begin to look for things that are creative rather than just repetitive. And I think there's where you're in the realm of culture rather than education, because you can educate an animal. You've seen them do tricks, haven't you? Well, I think that's a pretty good definition of the difference between education and culture. So you can see how the trampling of the herd would have a small chance to develop culture of an individual. It's got to be an individual affair. It's got to be a slow affair. It's got to be a peculiar to you affair. Now, how are you going to do it with 20,000 students in a university? How are you going to do it with high schools crammed 2 stories, 3 stories high with a crowd of students? As a matter of fact, culture is not for the herd. Culture is not for the crowd. Culture is an individual thing. And that's what our forefathers struck when they decided, and when they declared, that the individual is sovereign. The sovereignty of the individual. Now, that means a certain premium on aloneness to start with, a certain rejection of the common man as common, but insisting on his privilege to be uncommon. And so that exists in every human soul today, and this is the country that we live in that declares it, the only one that has made it official, the only one that has made it constitutional to be yourself. And we see abuses of it, of course, all down the line now. We see ourselves all drifting back again, drifting toward the commonplace, drifting toward the common man. And you hear it asserted that that was what our country meant, that the common man was free to be common. Well, he wasn't. He was free to become uncommon. And that's the freedom that we ought to tote and talk about. And we should resent with all our strength this drift toward equalitarianism, which is commonness raised to the nth power.
Do you think that it's the impact of city life which has deteriorated the...
Oh, of course, the influence of city life.
Is this why you're in favor of decentralization? Are you against the city as a unit of contemporary life, and how would you aid in decentralization in the face of the tremendous numbers of people we're dealing with now?
But it's because of the tremendous numbers of people and the advantages that those people now have that the city is dated. And the city is now a bad influence on human beings so far as their future is concerned, because there are so many of them. And they have now such advantages as they never had before. They have transportation, speed, listening, this we're using now. It's no longer essential for people to crowd together anywhere. And there's no reason why you can't have all the advantages of the city to a much greater extent far away from crowds. In fact, crowding is now anathema. Crowding cannot be done. Well, the city, of course, is a thing of the past. There was a time during the Middle Ages when it was the only source of culture. There was no way of acquiring this thing we call culture except by direct contact, see. It isn't so now. It hasn't been so for many years. It wasn't even so when this country was founded, but of course it was more so. But gradually all the development of all these sciences, the gifts of science to us, have made this crowding unnecessary. And it always was after the Middle Ages, it always was a detriment. It never had any real, never was any real asset to humanity. And especially when the emphasis now comes on the individual and the growth of the individual unit and the whole process of civilization dependent upon the quality of that individual, especially. We've got to give over this crowd. We've got to get out of the crowd. We've got to be all the crowd there is ourselves, in proportion as we desire it. Now, some of us will always want to huddle. Some of us will always want to pig pile. Some of us will let us, that'll segregate the sheep from the goats, so to speak. You can stay and huddle and pig pile if you want to. But when you feel yourself to be an individual and you feel this declaration of our freedom, when you get that into your system, you'll want to go out somewhere where you can be as alone occasionally and be yourself as you want to be and have the benefit of nature. You see, the city now is a divorce from nature. It didn't used to be such a divorce from nature as it is now, but now it is a great divorce from nature. And there's no substitute. You see, quality, there used to be a big sign on the roadsides. I used to say it was advertising a patent medicine, I think. So, quality knows no substitute, but nothing truer was ever said. Now, quality cannot come from pig piling and herding and trampling with the herd. Quality is not compatible with quantity. Quantity can never be quality. No matter what the quantity is, there'll always be in it the rising within of quality, see? And that is culture, and that is our country. That's what we've declared, that if you'd give this so-called common man a break equal to any other man's break, what was good in him, and the faith of democracy is that every man is good if he has a chance to be. He will be.
What do you envision as the future of architecture now?
The future of architecture is the future of the human race. The two are one. If humanity has a future, it is architecture as a basic element in its culture. And if it has no future, no architecture.
How do you decide on the materials that give your ideas concrete form?
Well, those that are native, of course, are best, most appropriate, and the cheapest, most feasible. If there's stone in the neighborhood, we like to use stone. If there are kilns and there's brick, and brick is characteristic, well, fire-built houses are good. And wood is always the friend of man. Don't you feel friendly to a tree when you see one? And if you don't see one, you're hungry for it. Association with trees. Trees and human beings belong together. I don't think one could exist without the other, perhaps. If they could, it would be the tree that would survive. Well.
What about the changing face of a city like New York, which is being torn down at a tremendous rate and being
But it isn't changing. That's the trouble. It's simply repeating and repeating and repeating and piling up on itself. It can't change. It has lost the capacity, the proportion to change. It's like something compressed into a tin canister or some metal form or some packaging. It's so pushed in tight it can't change. Well, it seems to me that crowding and pressure of individual upon individual, gracelessly, meaninglessly, is absolutely against the development of the individual as such. So I think the development of the individual is not possible on terms of modern urbanism. You can educate him, and that's where he is, I guess. It may be educational, it certainly isn't cultural.
I guess, as you've said, the danger is in the standardizations that come in the machine age.
Absolutely. It's taken me all these years to learn that standardization is no bar to beauty. And the standardization can be controlled and the machine used as a tool to develop a beauty greater and more beneficent, more pervading, more all-embracing than anything we ever knew before. So that's what this age means. That's what the machine age should mean. But it's being exploited and turned inside out, turned over wrong side up by all these opportunists and this desire for material benefits and success. Same old story. There's nothing new in it. It's just as it always has been. It's only when it is conquered and we're aware of this greater and finer way of life that we're truly Americans, in the sense that we have a new country and a new ideal, and we have a new, therefore, bound to have a new architecture.
You said before that science was opposed to beauty or alien to it. Do you think this is a permanent state, or?
I think science has far outrun our capacity to take its gifts and use them with proper profit to ourselves. I think science has now reached a point where we're on the brink by way of it, and we can destroy ourselves by one false step. Because science gave us things that we weren't yet ready to use. We didn't know how to use them properly. We don't know how to use speed. We don't know how to use so many of the things science has given us yet. And the fact that we're crowding in cities shows it. Proves that we haven't learned anything, that we haven't really profited by what science has done. Science destroyed the city. Science has given us the basis for an organic architecture. It's science now that builds the building that we call organic. But science as a tool, not as a master.
Do you plan for painting and sculpture within a house?
Well, certainly. It's an expression of an idea that embraces all of that. The conception of the house as an idea is aiming at beauty, concord, comfort, everything that goes into the making of the human spirit. Beautiful.
We were talking about contemporary art and sculpture and how they fit into your scheme of architecture and your philosophy of
contemporary arts?
Yes.
Well, that wasn't what I had in mind. I'm searching for a lost thread here. It was concerning human nature in search of something better than the thing it knows. Human nature is always restless, aiming, desiring, and feeling either an uplift or a depression or being shoved aside. Now, architecture gratifies that sense of the future, the uplift, the becoming. And of course, all art should, more or less does. But architecture primarily is the basis of that And from it you get your painters, and you get your sculptors, and you get your crafts people, all desiring to make something suitable, fitting, calculated to make human life happier. Gadgetry is intended to make it easier, and does. But without these other things of the spirit, these mechanical things which we have so many of now, and so much of, that has given us a facility we don't know what to do with. All we can do now is to rush from here to there with some idea that we want to go somewhere. We want to go now. But what we get out of going isn't what's so important as it ought to be. So here we are with all this increased facility, speed. And what is speed? Speed is just voracity, isn't it? You're voracious. You go this fast, and go there in 5 minutes, then you're looking forward to going there in 2 minutes, and pretty soon in 1 minute. And it's a kind of voracity that eats you up. And so we have that equivalent in nearly everything. I notice the boys, when they're working in the kitchen, turn on the radio and the television, and they'll see television, listen to music, while they're washing the dishes and cooking the food, and it all comes pouring in, you see, as though it didn't cost anything. Now, all that has its consequences. We have to reckon with it. And that's why it's so important that all this should be good. And none of it, almost none of it is. I should say the influence of 9/10 of it was demoralizing. Not building up, but deadening or deforming or something of the kind going on all the while.
Is it getting any better?
I don't know whether it's getting any better. Yes, it must get better. Things are always either getting better or worse. They never stand still. Now, of course, I see great evidences in architecture. While much of it and most of it is imitative and not really creative, still it's better than what we used to have. Still there is an improvement all down the line. There is a raising a standard, I think, in the country. And I believe that we're on the way to a culture of our own. I think we're going to have it. And I don't think I'd be alive here today. I wouldn't have the work I have at my time of life unless that was there. I think that perhaps I today am one of the best proofs you could have of the fact that we're going to have it. Otherwise, they'd have chucked me out long ago.
Well, that and the fact that the youth are so
much interested,
yes,
and so vitally interested in something that you wouldn't imagine they would be. You'd be surprised to learn of it. I was. No, it's there, and it's coming, and it's going to be a mess for some time to come. Nearly everything has been a mess until it qualified. Quantity is always a mess until it qualifies. Now, when quality comes in, and quality is coming, then we're going to be a great democratic nation, which means a nation with a great faith in humanity. That's what democratic should mean, and it doesn't mean that now. But it will eventually, and we'll have a greatest art I think the world has ever seen. We're on the way to it now. We've rejected all of these baser elements of conditioning and deforming and transferring of art to the nervous system, taking it from the region of the soul. We're going to put it back into the region of the soul again. Or it's going to take care of it itself. I don't think we'll do it. It isn't up to us really to do anything except what we believe in ourselves. to be ourselves is the great privilege conferred upon us now. Of course, without conscience, we can't belong to a society. If we were without conscience and we had the idea of freedom that seems to activate most of these people, we'd land in jail very soon. So conscience and freedom are inalienable companions. One is because of the other, should be. And if it isn't, we're not going to be a success as a nation. And we're not going to have an architecture, we're not going to have anything. We'll crawl. We'll go back to the slime, I guess.
Is your first concept of a house usually expressed best in one elevation or in several?
Plan is the thing. The thing comes to life in the plan because you can't make a plan without a sense of what the plan is for. And I think a plan is always beautiful, perhaps more beautiful than anything that ever comes afterward. The plan, the idea, is the plan. The plan contains the idea. Now, the house is an idea, if it's a good house. And that idea embraces all that composes, or will compose, the usefulness and beauty of that house. It's right there in the plan.
Do you often feel that there is a wide gulf between that first conception and the house as it's executed?
Never. Never. If there is, why, you've thrown it away and started again without knowing it. And that couldn't happen to an architect because the steps are like, they're all interknit, and it's like knitting something. You're weaving it and bringing it to be by way of actual steps in construction and in the use of materials and in the understanding of human nature which you possess. It's all interwoven. It's all a weaving. And after the weaving is done, there it stays. And you're interested in another weaving, and that stays. But it's always coming out from the everywhere into the here, and the best weaving is still to be.